The conference room aboard Orbital Station Zenith 7 was designed for comfort. The Galactic Coalition had spent considerable resources making sure every species could sit, stand, or hover in peace. Yet today, the room felt tense. 3 alien delegates sat across from the human representatives, their various sensory organs fixed on the fragile-looking creatures before them. Taemin stood at ease, his military posture relaxed but ready. He wore the standard dress uniform of the Republic of Korea Special Forces, dark and simple. Next to him, Ji-woo adjusted her tablet, her medical insignia catching the artificial light. She had been chosen for her dual expertise in combat medicine and xenobiology. Behind them, Hyun-sik remained silent, his weathered face betraying nothing. He had trained soldiers for 20 years and had seen everything. Or so he thought. Velthar clicked his mandibles together, a gesture the humans had learned meant curiosity. His 8 legs shifted beneath his armored carapace. He came from Tharnok, a world with gravity 20% higher than Earth. His species had evolved as ambush predators, strong and fast. Looking at the humans, he saw no natural weapons, no armor plating, no obvious advantages. Their skin looked soft, almost paper-thin. "We appreciate the welcome," Velthar said through his translator device. "The Coalition is eager to understand human military capabilities. Your world has been classified as Class 9 Death World, yet you appear." He paused, searching for diplomatic words. "Weak?" Taemin offered with a slight smile. "We get that a lot," Rin chimed in, her crystalline body refracting light in pleasant patterns. She was a scientist first, warrior second. "Our scans show your species lacks redundant organ systems. Your skeletal structure is internal and vulnerable. Your atmospheric requirements are narrow. Forgive the directness, but we are puzzled by your survival on such a hostile world." Ji-woo leaned forward, her expression friendly. "Earth is hostile. No argument there. Extreme temperature swings, aggressive microorganisms, megafauna predators, seismic instability. We didn't survive because we're the strongest or the fastest. Then how?" Cross, the 3rd delegate, spoke for the first time. His reptilian features showed genuine confusion. He came from a desert world where thick scales meant survival. These humans looked like they would tear if you grabbed them too hard. Hyun-sik finally spoke, his voice deep and calm. "We survived because we don't know when to quit. Would you like to see?" Velthar's translator picked up the idiom, but the meaning felt unclear. "Training," Taemin said simply. "We have exercises scheduled at our facility. Standard routine. You're welcome to observe." The 3 aliens exchanged glances through various means of communication. Standard training from a newly inducted species seemed hardly worth the trip to the surface. But protocol demanded cultural exchange. And they had come all this way. "We would be honored," Velthar said, though his tone suggested he expected little of interest. The shuttle ride to the surface took 40 minutes. The aliens noted how Earth's atmosphere buffeted the craft, how the temperature fluctuated wildly depending on altitude, how the oxygen levels would be toxic to half the Coalition species. Rin's instruments picked up countless microorganisms in the air itself. This world was trying to kill everything on it, constantly. They landed at a military facility in South Korea, where mountains loomed in the distance and the morning air was cold enough to make their environmental suits adjust automatically. Humans emerged from nearby buildings wearing minimal clothing despite the temperature. They ran in formation, their breath visible in the cold air. None of them wore protective armor. "They're not wearing suits," Cross observed. "Don't they feel the cold?" Ji-woo smiled. "They feel it. The human body shivers to generate heat. Discomfort isn't the same as danger for us. Besides, they'll warm up soon enough." The aliens were led to an observation platform overlooking a training ground. Dozens of human soldiers were assembled, all wearing identical combat uniforms. Taemin joined them on the field while Hyun-sik remained with the delegates, ready to explain. Today is basic combined arms training, Hyunsik said. Nothing special. They'll run, drill, spar, and practice tactical scenarios. Feel free to scan anything you like. We have nothing to hide. Velthar activated his personal recording device. This would be valuable data for Coalition military databases, even if it proved unremarkable. He watched as the humans formed neat lines. An instructor shouted something, and they began to run. 5 kilometers, Hyunsik noted. The aliens watched. And watched. The humans ran at a steady pace, their boots hitting the ground in rhythm. After 10 minutes, Rin's scanner beeped. Their core temperature is rising. Heart rates are elevated. They're experiencing significant physical stress. That's normal, Hyunsik said. But they're not stopping, Cross said, his voice uncertain. Why would they stop? They're not finished yet. 20 minutes passed. The humans were sweating now, their faces flushed. Some were breathing hard, their mouths open. Rin's scanner showed elevated stress hormones, muscle fiber tears, and oxygen debt in the bloodstream. By her species standards, these beings should be seeking medical attention. Instead, they kept running. Velthar felt something unfamiliar stir in his neural cluster. It took him a moment to recognize it. Unease. These fragile creatures were pushing themselves past what should be their breaking point. And they weren't stopping. They weren't even slowing down. When the run finally ended, the humans didn't collapse. They stood in formation, breathing hard but steady, waiting for the next command. That was the warm-up, Hyunsik said quietly. The 3 alien observers looked at each other. Suddenly, the day seemed much longer than they had anticipated, and somewhere in the back of Velthar's mind, a thought emerged that he couldn't quite shake. What kind of species calls that a warm-up? The morning sun climbed higher as the human soldiers moved into their next phase of training. The alien observers had taken seats on the platform. Though Velthar found it difficult to remain still, his instincts, honed by millions of years of evolution, were telling him something was wrong. Prey didn't push themselves like this. Predators didn't either. What were these humans? Junho stepped forward from the formation. He was shorter than Taemin, built with compact muscle, and moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent years mastering his body. He wore simple padding on his hands and feet, nothing more. Hyunsik gestured toward him. Junho is our hand-to-hand combat instructor. He'll demonstrate basic sparring techniques with a partner. Another soldier joined him in the training circle. They bowed to each other. A gesture of respect the aliens found curious. Then, without warning, they began to fight. It wasn't like combat Veltar had seen before. There was no hesitation. No careful probing. The 2 humans struck each other with genuine force, blocking and countering in rapid succession. Within seconds, blood appeared on one soldier's lip. He didn't stop. A kick landed hard against Junho's ribs with an audible impact. He didn't stop either. They're injuring each other, Rin said, her crystalline structure flickering with alarm. Deliberately. It's controlled sparring, Jiwoo explained calmly. They're not trying to kill each other. Just testing techniques. Relevant intestine. Relevant intestine. Relevant intestine. Relevant intestine. But that one's finger is broken, Cross pointed with one clawed hand. I can see it bending the wrong way. Indeed. One of the fighters had a finger on his left hand twisted at an unnatural angle. He glanced at it, grimaced, and continued fighting with his other hand. When the match ended, he simply pulled the finger straight with his other hand, grunted at the pain, and taped it to the adjacent finger. Should he not seek medical attention? Velthar asked. The human in question overheard and smiled, though it looked more like baring teeth. It's just a finger, sir. I've got 9 more that work fine. Jiwoo checked her tablet casually. Hairline fracture. It'll heal in a few weeks. He'll keep it taped and continue training. The aliens processed this in silence. On Velthar's world, A broken limb meant withdrawal from combat, medical treatment, and weeks of recovery. Here, it was dismissed as minor. The sparring continued. More blood appeared. More bruises darkened on human skin. One soldier took a kick to the face that snapped his head back violently. He stumbled, shook his head, and kept fighting. Rin's medical scanner was providing continuous data now, and none of it made sense. Brain trauma indicators, ruptured blood vessels, torn muscle tissue. These humans should be unconscious or dying. Instead, they were smiling. Why are they smiling? Cross asked, disturbed. Hyun-sik considered the question. Because they're improving. Pain tells them where their weaknesses are. They're learning. After the sparring, the soldiers broke for water. They drank, joked with each other, and tended their injuries with basic first aid. One had a towel pressed to his bleeding nose. Another was having his eyebrow held closed with small adhesive strips. They acted like this was completely normal. Next is precision training, Hyun-sik announced. Da-eun will demonstrate. A woman emerged from a nearby building carrying a long rifle. She was lean, her hair pulled back tightly, her face calm and focused. She walked to a position about 300 meters from a series of targets. Without ceremony, she lay down on the ground, positioned the rifle, and settled into complete stillness. She'll hold that position until she has the shot, Ji-woo said. Could be a few minutes. Could be much longer. Time passed. Da-eun didn't move. The aliens watched, fascinated despite themselves. 5 minutes became 10. 10 became 15. Rin's scanner showed that Da-eun's heart rate had dropped to almost nothing. Her breathing was so slow and shallow that she appeared dead. How long can she maintain this? Velthar asked. Hours if necessary. Hyun-sik replied. The record in her unit is 11 hours without moving from position. 2,000 trum. That's impossible, Cross said flatly. No living being can remain that still for that long. The body requires movement. Circulation demands it. Human hunters used to track prey for days, Ji-woo said, her voice taking on a lecturer's tone. We'd follow animals until they collapsed from exhaustion. Sometimes it took hours, sometimes days. We evolved to outlast everything else on our world. Patience is one of our greatest weapons. At the 20-minute mark, Da-eun fired. The shot echoed across the training ground. Through binoculars, they could see she had struck the target's center perfectly. Only then did she move, slowly rising and stretching her cramped muscles. When she returned to the observation area, the aliens could see her hands shaking slightly from the extended stillness. Her legs were stiff. She moved like someone in pain. Excellent work, Hyun-sik told her. Thank you, sir. Legs fell asleep at minute 12. Made the shot more challenging. She said it like it was a minor inconvenience, not a serious impediment to combat effectiveness. The aliens stared at her. Velthar's translator made a sound like grinding gears as it struggled with a concept. Finally, he spoke. You continued despite significant physical distress? Da-eun looked confused by the question. Of course. The target doesn't care if I'm uncomfortable. The mission doesn't care. So I don't care either. Rin's sensors detected something new in the human bloodstream. A chemical compound. Her database identified as adrenaline, pumping through their systems in quantities that should cause heart failure. Yet it didn't. Instead, it seemed to block pain receptors, increase physical strength, and heighten awareness. It was a built-in combat drug, produced by the body itself. They chemically alter their own biology during stress, Rin whispered to Velthar. They have a hormone that makes them stronger and stops pain. It's automatic. That's terrifying, Velthar responded. Taemin approached the platform, his earlier run seemingly forgotten. He wasn't even breathing hard anymore. We're about to begin close-quarters combat drills. Simulated building clearing. Would you like to observe from inside or outside the structure? I'm in. Inside, Velthar heard himself say, though he wasn't sure why he wanted a closer look at these increasingly disturbing creatures. As they moved toward the training building, Cross leaned toward Rin. They're not normal. This isn't normal evolution. No, Rin agreed, her structure dimming with concern. They evolved on a world that tried to kill them every single day. So they learned to ignore their own bodies, screaming at them to stop. They learned to push past limits that would destroy other species. They learned to be monsters. Cross finished quietly. Inside the building, the demonstration was about to begin. The aliens took protected positions. Hyun-sik handed them ear protection. "You'll want these," he said. "It gets loud. And watch carefully. This is where it gets interesting." Velthar wanted to argue that everything so far had been intensely interesting in the most horrifying way possible. But he simply put on the ear protection and waited. The humans below prepared their training weapons, checked their gear, and stacked up by the door. Then they began, and the aliens learned what humans truly meant by the word aggressive. The building erupted with sound and movement. The human soldiers burst through doors with controlled violence, their weapons up, voices shouting commands that echoed off the concrete walls. They moved like water, flowing around corners and through rooms with practiced coordination. But what struck the alien observers most was the speed. These humans moved faster than beings from higher gravity worlds. Their reaction times impossibly quick. "How are they so fast?" Cross demanded, his voice barely audible over the training exercise. "Your world has lower gravity than mine. You should be slower." Hyun-sik watched the soldiers work with obvious pride. Evolution. On Earth, slow prey got eaten, slow predators starved. For millions of years, speed meant survival. Those who were too slow died young and didn't pass on their genes. The training scenario involved simulated hostages and enemies. The humans had to identify and react to threats in milliseconds. Velthar watched as one soldier rounded a corner, identified a target, and fired in less time than it took his own nervous system to process what he was seeing. The human brain was making life or death decisions faster than species with supposedly superior cognitive development. When the exercise ended, the soldiers emerged sweating and breathing hard, but they were also laughing. They congratulated each other on good shots and teased one another about mistakes. One had been marked by a training round that indicated a fatal hit. He took the ribbing from his teammates with good humor. "They treat death as entertainment," Rin observed, her voice troubled. "They treat survival as the baseline," Jiwoo corrected. "Everything else is just learning. That soldier will remember the mistake that got him killed in the simulation. He won't make it again." Jiwoo. Harding Emmons. Jiwoo. Back on the observation platform, Hyun-sik pulled up a schedule on his tablet. "The soldiers you've been watching started their training cycle 72 hours ago. They haven't slept since then." Velthar's mandibles froze mid-click. "Impossible. They would be dead. My species requires 8 hours of rest per day. Without it, our nervous systems begin to fail within 40 hours. Humans can function for days without sleep," Hyun-sik said calmly. "Performance degrades, certainly. Reaction times slow. Decision-making suffers. But they remain combat effective for much longer than coalition medical databases would predict." As if to demonstrate, one of the soldiers stumbled slightly while climbing stairs. His teammate steadied him. Both men looked exhausted, dark circles under their eyes, movements slightly uncoordinated. But they were still training. "This is torture," Cross said, his scales rippling with distress. "You're torturing your own people." "Tact. We're preparing them," Hyun-sik replied without emotion. "In real combat, you don't get to sleep when you're tired. The enemy doesn't care if you're exhausted. So we train them to fight anyway." Minseo arrived then. A woman with sharp eyes and an unsettling smile. She was introduced as a psychological warfare specialist, whatever that meant. The translator struggled with the concept. "I understand you have questions about human endurance," she said pleasantly. "Would you like a demonstration of resistance training?" Before they could answer, she led them to another facility. Inside, several soldiers sat in chairs, their hands bound behind them. Bright lights shone in their faces. Loud music played at painful volumes. Instructors shouted questions at them, demanding answers. "What is this?" Velthar asked, though part of him didn't want to know. "Interrogation resistance training," Mincio explained. "If captured, they need to know how to withstand psychological pressure. We simulate enemy interrogation techniques so they learn to resist." The aliens watched in growing horror as humans deliberately subjected themselves to psychological torture. The soldiers in the chairs looked miserable, but they followed their training. They gave false information, deflected questions, and endured the harassment without breaking. "This would shatter the minds of most coalition species," Rin said quietly. "Prolonged stress of this nature causes permanent psychological damage." "It can," Jiwoo admitted. "We monitor them carefully. But humans have something that helps them endure. We call it spite." "Spite?" The translator made uncertain sounds, trying to process the word. "The desire to not give enemies what they want," Minseo clarified. "The drive to resist, purely because someone else wants you to break. It's not logical. It's emotional, but it's incredibly powerful. Some humans will endure almost anything if they're angry enough at whoever is causing the pain." Junho appeared again, this time with training weapons. He asked for volunteers for the next demonstration. 2 soldiers stepped forward. He blindfolded one and instructed the other to tie one arm behind his back. "Combat doesn't always happen under ideal circumstances," Junho explained to the aliens. "You might be injured. You might be in darkness. You have to fight anyway." The 2 soldiers sparred, one blind and one one-armed. It was clumsy and difficult, but they adapted. The blindfolded soldier learned to track his opponent by sound and air movement. The one-armed soldier learned to use his legs more effectively. They were compensating for massive disadvantages in real time. "When do you stop?" Velthar asked suddenly. The question had been building in his mind all day. When does a human warrior decide the fight is over? Hyunsik turned to look at him directly. "When the mission is complete. Or when we're dead. Those are the only 2 acceptable outcomes." "But surely there are circumstances where withdrawal is logical?" Cross pressed. "When victory is impossible?" "Victory is impossible until it happens," Taemin said, joining the conversation. He had been quiet for most of the day, simply observing. Human history is full of battles that were impossible until someone won them anyway. We don't calculate acceptable losses the way you do. We calculate acceptable costs for victory. Minseo smiled that unsettling smile again. "Let me tell you about human psychology. We have a saying, it's not about how hard you can hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. That's not just inspirational. That's doctrine. We train to absorb damage and continue fighting. We train to function through pain, through fear, through exhaustion. We train to be unkillable." "Nothing is unkillable," Rin said. But her voice lacked conviction. "True," Jiwoo agreed. "But humans take a lot more killing than you'd expect by looking at us. Our bodies have redundant systems. We can lose significant blood and keep fighting. We can operate with damaged organs. We've had soldiers survive injuries that should have been immediately fatal and continue to complete their missions before dying." The aliens absorbed this information in silence. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in colors of red and orange. The human soldiers were finally being dismissed for rest. They walked away with the casual ease of people who had completed an ordinary day's work, not beings who had pushed themselves to what should have been breaking points multiple times. "How often do they train like this?" Velthar asked quietly. "Every day," Hyunsik said. "Sometimes twice a day. This is normal for them." "Normal." Cross repeated the word like it was obscene. "Your species has a different definition of normal." Cross. As they prepared to return to the orbital station, Velthar looked back at the training facility. Lights were coming on in the barracks. The humans would eat, perhaps socialize, and then sleep for a few hours before doing it all again tomorrow. They would continue breaking their bodies down and rebuilding them stronger. They would continue learning to endure the unendurable. And somewhere in his mind, Velthar realized something that chilled him more than the Earth's cold air ever could. These were the humans at peace. These were humans training. What would they be like at war? The medical bay was clean and bright, filled with equipment that looked both familiar and alien to the Coalition observers. Ji-Woo had invited them here after the training day, promising to answer the questions that had been accumulating in their minds. Rin's sensors had been gathering data constantly, and what she was seeing didn't match anything in Coalition biological databases. "I want to show you something," Ji-Woo said, pulling up a holographic display of human anatomy. The three-dimensional image rotated slowly, showing organs and systems in detail. "This is a standard human body. Notice anything unusual?" Velthar studied it carefully. "Your skeletal structure is entirely internal. Most Coalition species have at least partial exoskeletons. You're very vulnerable to external damage." "True. But look deeper. We have 2 kidneys when we only need 1. 2 lungs. Our liver can regenerate itself even if partially destroyed. Our blood vessels will seal themselves if damaged. Our bones, if broken, will actually heal stronger than before." "That's common enough," Cross said, though he sounded uncertain. "Many species have redundancies." 7. Can your species survive with 1 lung destroyed?" Ji-Woo asked pointedly. "Silence. Humans can. We can survive with 1 kidney removed, portions of our intestines missing, damaged hearts, and even parts of our brain destroyed. We'll be diminished, certainly. But we'll live. We'll function. In some cases, we'll even continue fighting." She pulled up medical records, flagged for privacy but showing non-identifying data. This soldier had his leg partially severed during an accident. He applied a tourniquet himself, continued giving orders to his unit, and walked to the evacuation point. He'd lost 30% of his blood volume. He should have been unconscious. He wasn't. "The adrenaline," Rin said, understanding dawning. "The chemical we detected earlier. Partially. But it's more than that. It's will. Human consciousness can override physical limitations in ways we're still trying to understand scientifically. We can literally tell our bodies to ignore damage, and sometimes, impossibly." Da-Un appeared then, walking into the medical bay with a slight limp. She was the sniper who had held her position for 20 minutes without moving. Now, she was getting her legs checked after the exercise. She greeted the aliens politely and sat down for Ji-Woo to examine her. "Any numbness?" Ji-Woo asked professionally. "Some in the left foot. It's coming back now, though. Circulation looks good. You'll be fine by tomorrow." Da-Un noticed the aliens staring and smiled. "Sorry about my performance today. Usually, I can hold position longer without cramping. Money. 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 Money." "You held motionless for 23 minutes, Velthar said slowly. "You call that inadequate? Personal best is 90 minutes. I'm trying to beat it." She said it like discussing sports scores, not discussing something that should be biologically impossible. After Da-Un left, Ji-Woo continued the lesson. "Let me tell you about Earth. You've classified it as Class 9 Death World, and that's generous. Our planet actively tries to kill us. Temperature swings from -40 to +50 degrees Celsius in some regions. We have thousands of species that can kill humans with venom, claws, teeth, or disease. We have weather patterns that can flatten entire cities. Earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes. Artivone." She pulled up images of Earth's natural disasters. The aliens watched footage of tornadoes, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions with growing discomfort. And yet, humans spread across the entire planet. Every continent. Every climate zone. We live in deserts that would dehydrate most species in hours. We live in frozen zones that would freeze most species solid. We even live on the slopes of active volcanoes. We don't just survive Earth. We conquered it. But how? Cross asked, his voice almost pleading. You have no natural weapons, no armor. You're slow compared to Earth's predators. How did you survive? Because we don't stop, Jiwoo said simply. Let me tell you about human evolution. Millions of years ago, our ancestors were prey animals. We were hunted by things bigger and stronger than us. So we learned to run. Not fast runs, but long runs. We developed the ability to regulate our body temperature through sweating, which almost no other Earth species can do. We could chase prey for hours, days even, until the animal literally died of exhaustion. She showed them footage of humans doing something called persistence hunting, a human tracker following an antelope in the hot sun. The antelope would run, then stop to cool down. The human would follow, never stopping. Hours passed. The antelope, unable to cool itself while moving, eventually collapsed from heat exhaustion. The human, sweating and steady, walked up to it. You're persistent predators, Rin said, horror creeping into her voice. You hunt by simply not stopping. That's one way we survived. The other is adaptation. Humans are generalists. We can eat almost anything organic. We can learn any skill. We can survive in any environment if we have time to adapt. We're not the best at anything, but we're good enough at everything. Young Soo entered the medical bay then. He was the base commander, older than most of the soldiers, his hair going gray. He had the look of someone who had seen real combat, not just training. I understand you've been observing our training, he said to the aliens. I hope it's been educational. Disturbing would be more accurate, Velthar replied honestly. Young Soo laughed. A sound that startled all three aliens. I imagine it would be. You should know that what you witnessed today is basic training. Standard stuff we put all our soldiers through. The elite units train much harder. Harder? Cross sounded faint. How could it possibly be harder? Harder. Longer endurance runs. More complex combat scenarios. Harsher environmental conditions. Some of our special forces train in Arctic conditions, desert heat, underwater, in mountains with low oxygen. We train them to fight anywhere, under any conditions, against any enemy. He pulled up historical data. Let me give you context. Humans have been fighting each other on this death world for our entire existence. We've had thousands of wars, millions of battles. We've been testing ourselves against each other for so long that we've gotten very, very good at warfare. Every generation learns from the last. Every defeat teaches us something new. The images showed human conflicts through history, primitive weapons giving way to more advanced ones, tactics evolving, strategies adapting, an unbroken chain of violence that had refined humanity into something terrifying. You fight your own species? Rin asked, shocked. Regularly? We used to, all the time. We've gotten better about it in recent centuries. But yes, humans have always been our own worst enemies, which means we understand warfare in ways species who evolved in peaceful cooperation never will. Young Soo's expression grew serious. Let me tell you something important. Everything you've seen today, all the pain and suffering our soldiers endure, they choose it. Voluntary suffering. We could train them more gently. But gentle training produces gentle soldiers, and gentle soldiers die when real combat comes. So we make training harder than war. We make them suffer now so they survive later. That's insane, Cross said flatly. Maybe. But it works. Young Soo shrugged. Humans have a saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. For most species, that's just a nice metaphor. For humans, it's biological fact. We literally get stronger from surviving hardship. Our muscles tear and rebuild bigger. Our bones break and heal denser. Our minds face fear and become braver. We improve through damage. Tae-min joined them, fresh from the showers, looking relaxed despite the brutal day. Is Ji-woo giving you the scary biology lecture? Is there any other kind with humans? Velthar muttered. Tae-min grinned. Fair point. Look, I know today was a lot to process, but you asked to see human military capabilities. This is what we are. Not the strongest, not the fastest, not the smartest, but we're the most stubborn. We survive because we refuse to die. And if faced with impossible odds? Rin asked. Then we'll probably die, Tae-min admitted. But we'll make the other side pay for it. Humans don't believe in easy victories. For anyone. Tae-min. 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 The departure ceremony was formal but warm. The Korean military had arranged for traditional honors, soldiers standing at attention as the alien delegation prepared to return to orbit. Tae-min stood beside Hyun-sik, both in their dress uniforms, while Ji-woo finished some final data transfers with Rin. Velthar approached Tae-min separately, away from the official proceedings. His translator made uncertain sounds before he spoke. I want to thank you for your hospitality. And your honesty. You're welcome. I hope the visit was worthwhile. Worthwhile. Velthar's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. That's one word for it. Terrifying is another. I came here expecting to see primitive combat techniques from a newly inducted species. Instead, I've seen the most frightening warriors in the galaxy. Tae-min looked genuinely surprised. We're not that impressive. Half the species in the coalition are stronger than us. Many are faster. Some have natural weapons that make our rifles look gentle. But none of them are you, Velthar said quietly. None of them have your refusal to accept defeat. None of them train, like you do. None of them would continue fighting with broken bones and bleeding wounds while smiling about it. I watched your soldiers today, and I finally understand why you survived your world. Earth didn't make you strong. It made you unkillable. The two stood in silence for a moment. Finally, Velthar spoke again. I'm glad humans are allies. I never want to face you as enemies. Well, neither do we, Tae-min replied seriously. We've spent enough time fighting each other. We'd prefer to fight alongside the coalition, not against it. Nearby, Ji-woo was transferring the last of the medical data to Rin's portable database. The crystalline scientist flickered with deep thought as she processed everything she had learned. This data will revolutionize coalition medical understanding, Rin said. Your resilience factors, your redundant systems, your chemical stress responses. It's all so different from established xenobiology. Just remember that we're still fragile compared to many species, Ji-woo reminded her. We just hide it well. And we've learned to keep functioning, despite damage. I don't think I'll ever think of humans as fragile again, Rin admitted. Vulnerable, perhaps. But not fragile. Fragile things break easily. You break, and then keep going anyway. Cross was speaking with Young-soo, his reptilian features showing respect he hadn't possessed when he arrived. Your training methods would kill most of my people. Within days. The sleep deprivation alone would be fatal. Every species has different limits, Young-soo agreed. The key is understanding what those limits are, and then finding ways to push past them safely. Well, relatively safely. Will you share these methods with the coalition military? Young-soo considered carefully. We can share the principles, but trying to apply human training directly to other species would be cruel and pointless. You need to develop methods that work for your own biology. Though I suspect most coalition species will find even modified versions extremely difficult. Because you're from a death world. Because we're from Earth, Young-soo corrected. And Earth taught us that comfort is the enemy of survival. The shuttle lifted off eventually, carrying the 3 alien delegates back to orbit. They watched through the viewports as the Korean mountains grew smaller beneath them. Somewhere down there, human soldiers were already beginning another training cycle. The suffering would continue because the preparation never stopped. Aboard orbital station Zenith 7, the delegates prepared their report in silence at first. The data was comprehensive. The recordings were clear. The conclusions were unavoidable. Finally, Velthar began dictating the official assessment. Coalition High Command. This is Observer Velthar. Submitting field report on human military capabilities. Summary. Humans represent a unique threat profile, unlike any species currently in Coalition databases. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Humans did not evolve for warfare. They evolved for survival. On a Class 9 death world that actively tried to kill them. In response, they developed physical and psychological adaptations that make them extraordinarily dangerous combat opponents. Key findings. Humans possess pain tolerance far beyond galactic norms. They can function effectively with injuries that would incapacitate other species. They possess redundant biological systems that allow continued operation despite severe damage. They produce combat-enhancing chemicals naturally through their endocrine system. They can operate for extended periods without rest. They are capable of voluntary suffering in pursuit of improvement. Most concerning. Human psychology is fundamentally different from Coalition norms. They possess emotional drives labeled as stubbornness and spite that allow them to continue fighting long past logical surrender points. They view hardship as opportunity for growth rather than something to be avoided. They train by deliberately subjecting themselves to the conditions they fear most. Recommendation. Immediate elevation of human combat effectiveness. Rating to Tier 1. Threat level. Despite their physical limitations, humans should be considered peer threats to any Coalition military force. Diplomatic relations should be maintained at highest priority. Under no circumstances should military conflict with Earth be considered viable option. He stopped dictating and looked at his companions. Does that cover it? Add one more thing, Rin said, her structure dim with thought. They call suffering training. They smile while doing it. And what we saw was them at peace, preparing for war. We must never see what they're like when actually at war. The report was transmitted to Coalition High Command via quantum link. At the Central Military Headquarters, an emergency session was called. The command staff watched the footage in growing silence. Human soldiers running until their bodies screamed. Fighting while injured. Enduring psychological torture as training. Operating without sleep, for days. Admiral Thex Noor, a veteran of 40 campaigns across 20 star systems, watched everything twice. Then he made his pronouncement to the assembled officers. Recommendation approved. Humans are Tier 1 threat. Send immediate diplomatic communications to Earth. I want human military advisors training Coalition forces within 6 months. If we can learn even a fraction of their methods, adapted to our own species, our combat effectiveness will triple. And if we can't convince them to share their methods, an aide asked, then we make absolutely certain they remain allies. Because fighting Deathworlders, who train like that, would cost us everything. Back on Earth, unaware of the panic they'd caused in Coalition High Command, the Korean soldiers continued their routines. Min Seo found Ji-woo in the medical bay, organizing supplies. The aliens seemed pretty shaken up, Min Seo observed. They watched humans train. Of course they were shaken up. You think they understand now? Why we are the way we are? Ji-woo smiled. They think they do. They've classified us as warriors, built for combat. They still don't quite understand the truth, which is, we're not warriors. We're survivors. Everything we do, all the training, all the hardship, all the suffering we endure, it's not because we love fighting, it's because we refuse to die. Earth spent millions of years trying to kill us, and we're still here. That's what makes us dangerous. Not that we're good at war, but that we're too stubborn to lose. Min Seo laughed quietly. They definitely don't understand that part. They saw our training and thought that's us preparing for war. They don't realize that's just us preparing for life. Outside, the sun was setting again. New recruits were arriving at the facility, young men and women who would undergo the same training that had horrified the alien observers. They would run until their lungs burned. They would fight until they bled. They would learn to function through exhaustion and pain. They would suffer voluntarily because someone had decided it was necessary. And they would smile while doing it because they were human. And for humans, survival wasn't passive. It was active, constant. And it required preparation. It required training. It required becoming harder than whatever tried to break you. Somewhere in orbit, Velthar was adding a final personal note to his report. It wasn't official. It wouldn't be part of the permanent record. But he needed to write it down. I watched humans train today. I watched them suffer. I watched them bleed. And I watched them smile while doing it. I finally understand the Deathworld classification. Earth didn't just produce survivors. It produced a species that treats survival as the starting point, not the goal. They don't train to survive. They train to win. And they've decided that winning means never, ever stopping. Personal recommendation: never invade Earth. They call suffering training, and they smile while doing it. They are the most pleasant, polite, terrifying beings I've ever encountered. I'm honored to call them allies. I pray I never have to face them as enemies. He deleted the personal note. Some thoughts were too honest for official reports, but the truth remained, documented in hundreds of hours of footage and biological data. Humanity had joined the Galactic Coalition, and nothing would ever be the same again. In the training facility, the lights came on for the night shift, because human training never stopped, because the mission was never complete, because somewhere, someday, there would be a threat that needed facing. And when that day came, humanity would be ready. They would smile, and they would keep going.